Hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking about simple inoculation techniques. And really, when we're talking about inoculations, I'm just kind of talking about moving, again, a bacterium from one environment to another environment. This is normally one medium to another medium so that I can either grow this other organism so I can have more of it, rejuvenate it, maybe use it in certain types of testing, making other types of techniques out of it, whatever it might be. I'm just trying to basically get it from one area to another area. And when it comes to a lot of these inoculation techniques, the way that we're kind of going to run through it is that I'll sort of explain first off, how would I get bacteria out of either a broth, a slant, or a plate? And then once we've kind of talked about how do I get the sample out, then we'll talk about, okay, well then how do I then put it into either a broth, a slant, or a plate? And in that way, you can kind of mix and match the how do we get stuff out with the how do we deposit it. And then you can get these full techniques in the end that basically explain how we actually transfer materials from one place to another. So let's start out kind of with the basic items that you are going to need in order to perform really any of these procedures. You are going to need your Bunsen burner. You are going to need the striker to light it. You're going to need the loop in order to do the transfers. And then you're going to need really, again, your sample. Again, I'm going to go through having a sample in a broth, on a slant, and on a plate. So again, here's my plate sample, I got a broth sample, and I got my slant sample. I got all those different items, again, for each of the different techniques that we're going to do. And then, of course, if you're going to put it on a plate, you'll need a plate to put it on. If you're going to put it on a slant, you'll need a slant to put it on. If you're putting it in a broth, you need a broth to put it in. Those are just kind of the basic items that you are going to need. And of course, make sure that before you start any of your procedures that everything is labeled according to the way that it worked out in our standard labeling techniques. But really, kind of with that in mind, let's get into talking about the broth component of things. So I'm going to go ahead and get my Bunsen burner going so that we can get started. All right. So let me bring this over here. Let's see, these are my two broths. And, oops, all right. So in order for me to extract a bacterium from a broth, again, this would be the bacterium that I want, I would just go ahead and I'm going to use my basic aseptic technique. So I'm going to go ahead and flame my loop. No way to really speed this up. It's going to take a while. Now again, I'm just going to kind of keep my loop by the flame, kind of our sterile field. Give it a good 10 seconds or so is kind of the basic outline of what I want to do. I'm going to take my broth, and again, I'm going to hold it. This is the standard technique that we use. You hold it in your pinky. And by doing that, now I can unscrew my tube. I'm going to pass it through the flame a couple times. Dip my loop into the broth. Pass it through the mouth of the tube through the flame a couple times again. And ta-da! I now have my sample ready to go on my loop. And I can now put it again either in another broth, on a slant, or I can put it on a plate. So let me go ahead and flame this real fast. And again, that was how we collect from a broth. All right. Next up, we'll go through how to collect from a slant. So again, this is my slant that I have right here. Just giving this just a little bit of time to cool down because I'm going to be doing a lot of flaming kind of back to back here. So this is probably pretty good. Let's go ahead and do our slant. How do we extract from a slant? Same basic thing. Go ahead and flame it using our standard aseptic technique. All right, just going to hold it near the flame, give it a good 10 seconds or so, and then we should be good to go. Let's see, it looks like that's about 10 seconds. So again, same technique, hold the cap with your pinky, unscrew it, pass it through the flame a couple times, and then I'm just going to get just a tiny little bit here. You never need a whole lot of bacteria. Those little colonies have so much bacteria in it, but that's basically it. So I'm gonna go ahead and that's how we're now ready again to go either to the broth, another slant, or plate. We're now ready to go. Let me go ahead and flame this guy real fast, and then I will show you how little bacteria I actually took off of my slant. So there we go. Alright. Put that kind of there. So, gotta get around the flame here. Basically, it's a little bit hard to see. No, it's not shown up super well. Right there, right in here, that tiny little bit right there, that is all that I took. Maybe about half a centimeter worth, maybe less, but right in there, that tiny little scrape. That is all the bacteria I took off of there. So there's still tons and tons and tons on it all around. You can kind of see it a little bit better right there. I'll sort of point it out a bit easier on the video. But that's all that you need to take off of there. That is more than plenty of bacteria in order to inoculate another item. Now, if I'm then ready to go ahead and do my plate, go ahead and do the same thing. Basic aseptic technique. Let's go ahead and flame our loop. There we go. Give it a little bit of time here. Let's see where we're at. Give it just a few minutes, or not a few minutes, a few seconds. Don't want to be a few minutes, it's going to be too long. Alright, I'm going to take my plate. Again, trying to keep it closed for as long as possible. A good technique to make sure that your loop is cooled down all the way is just kind of tap it against an uninoculated part of the plate. By doing that, you ensure that your loop is all the way cooled down. Then I'm just going to grab just a tiny little bit of bacteria. See if I can show you that again. A tiny little scrape up there. Right there. That's all I took. Just that tiny little bit. And that is all that we need. That's probably more than enough again in order to extract our bacteria from a plate. Alright. Now, the next thing we're then going to go through then is how would I go about now inoculating another tube, slant, or a plate. So I'm going to assume that I just did all the stuff previously. I have my sample on my loop. I am ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and inoculate a broth. The technique is fairly similar. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to flame the mouth of my tube, dip my loop inside of the broth, flame the mouth of the tube, and then now I'm going to clean my loop so that it no longer has bacteria on it. It's a little fast there. Let's go back a little bit. There we go. All right. So again, if we kind of reset, let's assume that I just grab my sample. The sample is on my loop, and I'm ready to inoculate now a slant. So again, our slants, they have the little bit of slanted auger inside of there. It's going to be the same basic thing. Grab my tube, pass it through the flame a couple times, take my sample again, and then I'm just going to very gently zigzag up the loop. Very gently, or zigzag up the slant, sorry. So I'm not going to dig into the auger, I'm just going to very gently zigzag up that auger. Pass it through the flame a couple times. Done. And then I'm going to go ahead again, I'm going to flame my loop in order for all that excess bacteria to be gone. Alright, let's reset again. I'm not going to inoculate a plate, so I just did all this stuff before. I got my sample on my loop, that's what we're going to assume. And now I'm going to take my plate. So for this one here, this one is actually even more straightforward again. I got the stuff on my loop. Just going to take my plate, open the lid, then I'm just going to streak across the plate. Done with that part, flame the loop. All right, and there we go. So those are kind of the three basic techniques that we're going to be using. I will do videos over some of the more advanced techniques that we're going to be doing as well, but those are kind of, again, the three basic or the simple inoculations that we tend to do. I will go ahead and kind of make another video real quick as well, where I go through a full transfer all the way through from start to finish, basically for each of the different items, but it'll all be coming from a broth just to make it easier. But really, I think that should be everything that I need to talk about in reference to simple inoculations.